Something is happening right now that the mainstream media isn't framing correctly. The most powerful military alliance in human history just got threatened by its own leader. And the country that was supposed to collapse in days, it's still launching missiles every 90 minutes. Oh, welcome to Daily Reports, where you get clear, reliable, and up-to-date coverage of global events. Let's rewind. When this conflict began, the narrative was simple. Overwhelming force, rapid results, swift capitulation. That was the plan. But plans don't survive contact with reality. And reality, right now, is deeply inconvenient for Washington. Here's what we know. The conflict entered its third week. Over 2.5 weeks of sustained military engagement between Israeli and American forces on one side and Iran on the other. And Iran is still standing. Not just standing, Iran is firing back. According to reports emerging from Israeli media, including Channel 12, there were periods within the last 48 hours where new waves of Iranian missile attacks were arriving every 90 minutes, from Saturday midnight through Sunday night. Continuous, relentless, coordinated. That is not the behavior of a country on the verge of collapse. That is the behavior of a country that prepared for this, and prepared quietly. Here is where it gets genuinely alarming, depending on which side of this conflict you're watching from. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps made a statement this week that deserves far more attention than it received. They said this: every missile, every drone, every weapon system deployed in this conflict so far, all of it was manufactured more than a decade ago. Old inventory, legacy systems. And then they said something that should make every military strategist pause. The weapons Iran developed after the June 2025 12-day war, the next generation systems, the newer platforms, they haven't used a single one. Not yet. The Iranian Foreign Ministry echoed this. Iranian military officials repeated it. This isn't casual posturing. This is deliberate signaling. Think about what that means strategically. Iran is essentially saying, you've seen our older catalog. The new collection hasn't shipped yet. Whether this is fully accurate or partially psychological warfare, the message is clear. Iran is pacing itself. It is managing escalation with discipline. And that discipline is the part that makes this conflict so difficult to resolve quickly. Now let's talk about the moment that, frankly, should be dominating every international headline. The United States issued what can only be described as a threat to NATO. The message, as reported and widely circulated, if NATO member states do not align with American objectives in this conflict, specifically regarding Iran, then those countries should not expect full American commitment to their defense in a future crisis. Read that again. The cornerstone of Western collective security, the foundational promise that an attack on one is an attack on all, was just used as leverage, as a bargaining chip. That is extraordinary. But before we get to what this means for the future of the alliance, let's ask the more revealing question. Why does America need to threaten its allies at all? When a nation needs to pressure its partners into participation, it tells you something critical about the underlying situation. Strength doesn't beg, leverage doesn't plead. Washington reportedly reached out directly, by name, to some of its closest partners, the United Kingdom, France, Japan, South Korea, and others. None of them committed. Not because they don't have relationships with America, they do, deep ones, but because the political calculus has shifted. The trust architecture that held the Western alliance together for decades has developed visible cracks, and those cracks didn't appear overnight. They've been widening for years. What we're watching now is the moment those cracks became structural. Let's address the uranium question, because it's the one that carries the most long-term consequence. Iran's government has publicly stated it possesses approximately 450 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity. Independent international experts, not Iranian state media, objective analysts, have assessed that with focused effort over a matter of weeks, Iran could potentially conduct a nuclear test detonation. That is the accepted technical consensus. It's not a fringe position. Now here's the twist. After American B-52 strikes targeted suspected nuclear storage sites, the official Iranian response wasn't denial, it was something far more strategic. Iranian officials confirmed the sites were struck, and then stated that the uranium had effectively been buried deeper underground as a result. When Iran's foreign minister was pressed by international journalists on the current location of the enriched material, the answer was essentially, the bombing took care of that for us. Consider the implication. If accurate, the strikes didn't neutralize the nuclear material. They may have made it harder to locate and extract. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin had proposed a diplomatic framework where Iran's enriched uranium would be transferred to Russian custody, a mechanism that would reduce proliferation risk while giving Iran a face-saving off-ramp. Washington declined. In hindsight, that decision is now being scrutinized. Because the alternative, a prolonged conflict with a nuclear-capable adversary whose uranium stockpile is of uncertain location, carries consequences that no military strike can fully resolve. Let's stop the strategic analysis for a moment, because behind every data point in this conflict is a human being. Iranian casualty figures have now approached 1,400 killed. Millions, approximately 3.2 million people, have been displaced from their homes. Thousands more are injured. In Lebanon, since early March, over 850 people have been killed. Among them, 107 children, 66 women, over 2,100 injured. These are not statistics. These are families. International human rights monitors have documented the use of white phosphorus munitions in the conflict zone. White phosphorus burns at temperatures exceeding 815 degrees Celsius, nearly 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. It adheres to surfaces. It cannot be easily extinguished with water. It continues to burn until it exhausts its fuel or is deprived of oxygen. Its use in civilian proximate areas is considered a violation of international humanitarian law by numerous legal bodies. Reports indicate approximately 500 individuals have been detained inside Iran on accusations of providing intelligence to enemy forces during the bombardment. Roughly half were reportedly government employees, accused of target identification and transmitting location data. The internal pressure inside Iran is real. The damage is real. But here's what Israeli security officials, not Iranian sources, Israeli ones, reportedly told their own government this week. No meaningful strategic progress has been achieved. Efforts to catalyze civilian uprising against the Iranian government have produced no results. That assessment from within the Israeli security establishment is arguably the most significant piece of news to emerge from this conflict in days. Let's zoom out and think like analysts for a moment. Iran has absorbed significant damage. Its infrastructure has been struck. Its leadership has suffered losses, including, according to reports, Ayatollah Khamenei. His son has assumed a forward role in continuity of governance, but Iran's command and control structure appears intact. And in warfare, command and control is everything. An army that maintains coordination and leadership coherence can absorb physical damage and continue fighting. History is full of examples. What breaks armies and nations is not destruction alone. It's disintegration of command. Iran hasn't disintegrated. Meanwhile, the economic pressure on all parties is compounding. Early estimates suggest losses in the range of $16.5 billion within just the first 12 days of the conflict. Global shipping routes through the region remain under stress. The Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil passes, hangs over every diplomatic conversation like a suspended blade. Here is the strategic asymmetry that defines this entire situation. If the Strait of Hormuz reopens while the conflict is still active, before any ceasefire, Washington can frame that as a win. If it reopens only after negotiations conclude, after Iran agrees to terms, then Iran controls the narrative. Iran becomes the party that granted access. Iran claims the moral and strategic victory in the eyes of the region. And if that happens, every Gulf state that purchased billions of dollars of American military hardware will be asking a very uncomfortable question. If American weapons and American power couldn't decisively resolve this, what are we paying for? The answer to that question will reshape arms procurement, alliance structures, and regional security architecture for a generation. Inside the United States, a parallel battle is underway. Senior American officials have publicly accused domestic media of deliberately distorting coverage to damage the administration's credibility. The argument, the media's institutional hostility shapes public perception more than battlefield reality. This pattern, when military campaigns encounter resistance, redirect attention toward press criticism, is not unique to any one country or era. What it signals, however, is relevant. When external results are difficult to control, internal messaging becomes the priority. And American public sentiment matters here, because this conflict has never been broadly popular. Senator Bernie Sanders, one of the most prominent voices in progressive American politics, stated publicly that the current administration was drawn into what he called a deeply unpopular conflict, at the instigation of a foreign government's leadership, and is now politically trapped by it. That framing, trap, is resonating, because the exit paths are narrowing. A decisive military victory? Israeli security officials themselves say it isn't materializing. A negotiated settlement? Iran will extract concessions that look like validation. Continued escalation? At what cost and with which allies? None of those options are clean. Arab states in the Gulf have maintained extraordinary public restraint throughout this conflict. But Iran has raised the pressure. Iranian officials have presented what they describe as evidence that military strikes against Iran are being launched from American installations on Gulf Arab soil. They've issued warnings to civilians in certain areas of Dubai and Doha, suggesting those locations could become targets if the situation escalates. The warnings triggered visible anxiety, movement, uncertainty. Arab governments are caught in an impossible position. They host American forces. They rely on American security guarantees. But they also share a region with Iran, and they will share that region long after any American administration has moved on. They have chosen, for now, to absorb the pressure quietly, But quietly is not the same as indefinitely. Countries including China, Russia, Azerbaijan, and Vietnam have reportedly extended humanitarian support to Iran. Medicine, food supplies, maintaining economic and diplomatic threads even amid the conflict. The world is not uniformly aligned behind either side of this war. That too is a strategic reality Washington must factor in. Here is where we are. A conflict that was expected to be brief has entered its third week with no decisive outcome. The most powerful military alliance in the world is fracturing under internal pressure. A sanctioned nation has demonstrated weapons discipline that surprised its adversaries and claims its most advanced systems haven't been deployed yet. The nuclear dimension remains unresolved, with enriched material of uncertain location. Human casualties are mounting on multiple fronts, and the diplomatic off-ramps are narrowing with each passing day. History doesn't move in straight lines. Wars end in ways that rarely match the intentions of those who started them. What seems clear is this. The outcome of this conflict will not be determined solely by military force. It will be determined by who can hold their strategic coherence the longest and who blinks first. The world is watching, and the decisions made in the coming days will echo for decades. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to smash the bell icon so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Take good care of yourselves, keep supporting this channel, and thank you for watching.
Breaking news. Global conflict escalates as tensions rise in key regions. Authorities urge calm.